Reverend Kenyatta, I've just been an admirer of yours for so long. We were talking earlier about when I was young coming up, how I would be on the corner of 125th Street in Harlem in front of Chock full of nuts with a crowd of people standing around, and you would be up in front of the fruit truck and you would be going on. I mean, you raised so many valid points. I was just always interested as to um, where did you get so much information, and do you feel that presentation really made a difference in the life of the community and the people that heard you?
Well, I tell you, I believe that after looking back on hindsight, I certainly believe that I believe I made a contribution. And as a result, and when you can be walking up and down streets and going places and have young girls and young men walking up to you, thanking you for that opportunity, certain things that you brought forth, and you've seen the growth. And today I'm doing so many papers, I mean not papers, that did come to me for information and things that went on many years ago that people had no knowledge of, and I can certainly say from all the way from Harvard, all the way from Yale to jail, I have made a great contribution, and I'm certainly happy that now that I'm down and getting into the twilight of my years, I can look back and say, Lord, I thank you for the contribution that I've made.
What about your upbringing? Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, but I was raised in the South, in a little place down there called Durham, North Carolina. And as a result of that, I was blessed, and I was the first black man in World War II to be charged with mutiny and sedition. And as a result of that, I came out of that, and I was blessed to be surrounded, and everywhere that I've ever been, that I've always had the opportunity, somehow or another I find myself right in the midst of those who said they know the way, and I was always available. One of the first black preachers that helped me to develop, Bishop Charles, used to be a great evangelist here in this city, and for another great man that really was very good to me was Dr. Matty Wilson. He was the one that brought me in this conference, so many great men that, and everyone know by now that Malcolm X had the opportunity being with him, and one of the greatest black congressmen in the history of this black community, Clayton Powell. So that's, I've been rich with those type of things, or meeting those type of personalities, and as a result of that, God has been good to me.
Yes, he has. Oh, you raised this point. I'm mutiny and sedition. Can we just hear a little bit about
that's the mutiny and sedition is the 66th article of war, when down in a place called Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I was in the army down there, and I refused to be pushed around, and I refused to be, when you got back in those days, when you got on the bus in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, on the post, they would, after coming down in the black area, and they'd put you get on the bus, and then they'd pull the curtain on the bus, and we went, and you go into Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and as a result of that, I got myself in trouble there, where this bus driver questioned the young man I was with about I think it was 15 cents to get to town, and he questioned him about did he pay his fare, and the brother said, I dropped my money in. And this white man told him, said, what you calling me a lie? And the brother said, I'll go further than that. And as a result, he killed him, shot him, and we was loading on the bus to go back to the
The black
base.
man shot the bus driver?
The other bus driver shot the black man.
Oh.
Because the white man told him wasn't no nigga gonna call him a damn lie.
Oh.
And so, well, I go back further than that. It was just sad.
That must have had a tremendous impact on you.
Well, it did. Matter of fact, in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, that in the stockade, I'll never forget it. They didn't arrest us. We was on maneuvers from Alabama, and what happened? They didn't arrest us there because the brothers, they stood up there, and everybody wanted to point out who always was talking. And the CO called me into our office and said, I've been hearing a lot of talk about you down here trying to change our laws and challenging me and he's the captain. Now, I was pretty filled up. He had killed, my brother had been killed, and I jumped across the desk, and as a result of that, they put me on the rest of quarters. And that next morning they came out for reveille. I thought it was all forgotten about. The provost marshal came down from headquarters, and they wanted to put, because they had a riot that night, and they put me. They picked out some fellows, but nobody picked me out. But they called my name on a piece of paper. Said the guy said, walked up to me and said, call you under arrest. And I had an M1 rifle, and I said, arrest me? I said, no. And I pushed my clip in and jumped back. And everybody, all the brothers, all the squads broke. How the brothers. That's how they got me for inciting a riot and attempt to. And as a result, days later, they came down to the motor pool.
Is this about the time you realized there was a fire burning inside of you in regards to just the issue of racism?
Yet I go further than that. One day I was in the motor pool, and the squad car drove up and taking me up to headquarters, because they didn't arrest me in Mississippi, but they arrested me there in Alabama. And we went into the provost marshal head office, and he said, I'm going to read you to the 24th article of war. I'm not going to ask you no questions, and I don't want you to ask me none. So he said, call in the guards, and they had already backed the truck up to the back door. And about 6 officers, the lowest one in there was a buck sergeant. And they carried me to the stockade, and when we got to the stockade, this big old redneck white man, he said, this that bad, so-and-so. And these was brothers. And he started punching me in my stomach. And I know I probably couldn't have whooped him, but I thought with the brothers standing there, I had a chance, and so I swung on him. So they put me in the hole, and that next morning for a day, they carried me back to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where I was tried. It was late on in life, make a long story short, that it was Clayton Powell and Mary Cloud Bethune that came to the Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and under the leadership of president at that time was Harry Truman. The war had ended, and they had me restored back to duty.
Really? Mary McLeod Bethune.
Mary Cloud Bethune and Clayton Powell. And as a result of that, it shows you that my history goes back a pretty long ways.
Yes, it does. And I think we just need to give folks a time frame. Um, Approximately, how long have you been around? When you talk about the Army, was it in the 40s and the
Well,
30s?
let me tell you, I went in the Army in 1942, and it was from, you look at, I served in the Army from 1942 to 46. And then lately, I went to Detroit, and that's where I met another good friend of mine. I was a somewhat halfway decent baseball player, and I used to play obvious from Jackie. And Jackie, when he came in, I think it was 1947, and Jackie, he was the one to insist. And then I met Malcolm in Detroit, and that's how I came to New York. Well, I'd been to New York because I happened to have one of the best jobs in 1939 in the World's Fair.
Really?
That's how I met many of I used to be with the Linda Hoppers. That's when the Savoy was absolutely blooming, and the Fred Clagley and Linda Hoppers, and so therefore I've been blessed to know the great men like Dr. Mishaw and Herman Stevens, George Stevenson, better known as Daddy Grace. And I used to get that's how I was able to survive. I used to live right today where the Schomburg Library is. That's where you could get a root beer and a hot dog for 30 cents.
Really?
So therefore, you know, I go way back, and I've been blessed in my late years. People's like the greatest man that was known in Harlem at that time was Bumpy Johnson.
Absolutely.
And Bumpy, and I got mixed up in that with Bumpy and all of them. Me and Bumpy was. I can look up back and laugh at it now. Bumpy, in his flamboyant ways, that he was knowing that he was the godfather of Harlem. And me and him used to get in an argument about it. I'd tell him, you ain't the only one supposed to have all the beautiful women. Well, who gave you that idea? But because at that time, Bumpy used to be the one who used to go pick up Lena Horne and them, and so it was that type of relationship, and that's how I got to be well known.
What is the difference? This is not on my list, but it's just a question. What's the difference between the Renaissance of Harlem then and the Renaissance of Harlem now? What do you see the difference?
Well, the big difference were the day and then. I don't care how, if you didn't have a dime in your pocket, you had pride. You was dressed. Nobody didn't know what the circumstances were. You were somebody. You used to, the old pool room there at 135th, what they call the old pool room where I forget the club they used to call it, but that's where all the entertainers, the Ink Spots was a big name. There was a big group at that time, and Bill Robinson, he was another one. He couldn't stand to lose. He used to knock me out. You shoot pool with him, and if you beat him, you just couldn't stand to lose. You look for a fight, and he was the type that goes way back. That was around in the 50s. Cause I never will forget his birthday that year. He danced down 50th Street, and the great Bojangles.
Bojangle Robinson.
But at that time, everybody was somebody. You didn't know what the circumstances, but everybody was somebody. And the difference was they had pride. It was raised pride. You couldn't, and at that time You had the Brown Bummer, Joe Louis, one of the greatest champions that ever lived. And I had the good blessings to be in the midst of those type of individuals. And
Did you ever have any political aspirations?
I never did because, first of all, I never looked at it in that sense. And then after being raised up in the South and being brutalized down there, I had night riders to come in and take me out. And the other background of my life that I haven't revealed to you is, I was one of the first young men on death row.
Really?
Yeah.
This is
Right.
fascinating.
So it's a long story. And as a matter of fact, the late Ben Chavers, I was telling him, Ben came out of South Carolina, and when he got Charlie, it was a man by the name of, here in New York, by the name of Charlie Cobb, and I think you know him.
Mhm.
Charlie Cobb was a great whites, you know how white people do then, and they're still doing it. How they can take a black figure and use them to absolutely to manipulate other blacks. And I've had my share of suffering. So that's why I often, I'm constantly now trying to tell young ministers that I've been preaching for a long time. I just hadn't been able to organize my preaching like I do now. And that's why one of the men that I often, the opportunity that was in it to me was Mattie Wilson. Mattie Wilson, when Paul Robeson, I never will forget it, when Paul Robeson died, Mattie Wilson was one of the guests, and I was a guest. And so, and I asked him, how are you going home? He told me, he said, I want you to take me home. And on the way, he told me that night in the car that, don't you come to the conference. Cause like it is now, you got to come with somebody, some clergy got to send you in, you got to be related to some sort of church. But Mattie Wilson brought, as the voice say, he brought me in the side door. He brought me in this, and that's how I became in the conference. And they used to tease how they did make the new layman sit back there in the back. And it was a fellow in this conference by the name of Cook. He was a great singer. He was a great singer, and he was the one. He said, "You come up here and sit with me." So that's how.
Well, I got to talk about it. You're talking about Manny Lee Wilson, the former pastor of the Convent Avenue Baptist Church and Baptist Ministers Conference, part of the World Council of Churches, vice president, and that's how I came to Convent. Dr. Wilson took me under his wing, and he was brilliant. He was a strategist. He was a visionary. But more importantly, he led that conference into a lot of struggles that the conference may not have gone into.
That is correct.
Dr. Wilson's had a love for women in the ministry. What do you know about that?
Well, one of the things about him, he taught me that his salary. I think he got it was every first Sunday. I think it was. He tell me. But one thing about him. And although, when Nixon was the president, he used to go down and play tennis. Yeah. A lot of people didn't know the power that Dr. Wilson, he wasn't like the flamboyant type of preachers you see today. He was the type, you would never know that he had the type of influence that he used to peddle. And at the Council of Churches, he wasn't no little person, he was a big person. And they listened to what he had to say. But today, you don't have that, don't have that sort of leverage today. And unfortunately, if anything was to happen today, you don't have that type of clergy around today that has got power, that can call peoples together, and they'll come. We don't have that today, north or south. You don't have that type of personality around. today.
Dr. Kenyatta, um, I had an, you know, when we were coming up and, Martin Luther King had his own reputation and was doing a leadership march in the South, while Malcolm was here in the North, and still we were getting a flavor of that maybe we should maintain segregation because it was, we're talking about, segregation as a means of equalizing. Black people didn't really mind segregation as long as things were equal, as long as black stores had the same materials as white. What was, I guess, the inside thing? They must have met. Do you know what their differences were, and were you ever privy to be in a meeting where both men sort of like put it on the table? Martin Luther King saying integration is the way to go, while Malcolm had a different.
Well, that was an individual was talking about buying restaurant. It was always that debate was supposed to take place between Martin and Malcolm. And Malcolm used to always have a term that if he ever met Martin Luther King, he was going to slap him to see how nonviolent he were. And that the most famous picture you can see today is where Martin and Malcolm is, and I happened to be present when that picture was taken, and I told him, I said, "You got your chance now, Doc," and that's why he both broke out a big laugh. But the most tragic thing, the story, out of all the books have been written, the story has not been told how both of these individuals died at the age of 39. They were born in 1929, and both of them died at the age of 39. It shows you how leadership comes in the manner that they arrived at, and as a result, they both was killed by the same force. Don't let nobody fool you. I've learned to understand from Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner, Gable Presso, all of the great warriors that came on the scene to educate their people. I've learned to see how that the system wouldn't allow such things like that to take place. But they both was great.
Powerful. The Third World Trade Center. Back in the heyday when the Tree of Life was sitting there on 125th Street, right off of Lenox Avenue, not bothering anybody, just sitting there doing business, and then up comes this plan, and I sort of remember you out there on a couple of those Saturdays really giving the elected officials hell about a plan that they didn't really know where it was going. It appeared to have all kinds of problems with it. It was supposedly going to be funded by the feds as a means of, inroad into trade with Africa. And here we are now, we're talking almost 40 years ago.
And it still came about, and the money was ripped off right and left. And the story has never been told, and how that money got in certain people's hands and never was spread it down, and never was utilized. It's a sad commentary. Believe me when I tell you, the state office building wouldn't be there today if it hadn't been by a man the name of Nelson Rockefeller. We do a lot of talking, but you got to have people there. The people that just rip off people's the money, and they say that it takes the money and run, and nobody there to speak the language.
Well, there was a time when people really didn't want the state office building.
But that is true. It was certainly, there was a time that whole, it was supposed to be, some of them was arguing for a high school, the first high school to be there, but that didn't work out. But it shows you the power that when you go back and look at all of those great names, those great personalities, you can see that I don't care what your dream is, if you don't have the guts and the time to put in, you'll never be able to duplicate your dream, and if you're not there to see it. That's why I'm saying today, give me my flowers. while I can smell them, because that is the name of the game.
Dr. Kenyatta, there's so much more I could ask you, but we've come to the end of this program. I want to thank you. I've been insightfully fooled here today. We hope that you will come back again as time permits so that we might continue with some more questions and just to listen. That's really what I want to do, just listen. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk to you today and come into the program. And we'd like you to close us with a little word of prayer.
Well, I certainly want to thank you for this opportunity, but in the meantime, this is Black History Month, and we need to go forward and to be able to tell the story. God, our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for this opportunity to meet at the round of this table and to be able to tell some of the things. But I hope that what we have said and done will be in the benefit of some little girl or some little boy, where we can able to meet somewhere and they can say that in the old Negro spiritual, free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last.